All right. Hello and welcome everyone to the sixth episode of the Daily Roam. Our website is thedailyroam.com and our in-game channel is the Daily Roam. To start it off today, we have a special guest with us today. We have CCP Rise on the podcast. So say hello.
Hello.
Sweet. And yeah, legitimately CCP Rise. And Spill is here as well.
Hello.
Yeah, just real quick. This podcast was delayed a little bit because we wanted to. It would have been weird to kind of put one out intermediately when we knew CCP Rise was coming on, and we had a lot of questions and stuff for him. So thank you guys for bearing with us. Thanks for all the support, everyone coming in the in-game channel and saying hello and how much they like us and how much they hate us or whatever you do. I really appreciate it, all of it. And again, thanks for all the support on Reddit and the forums and everything. I appreciate it, guys. And yeah, so you are all in for a treat. We have CCP Rise on here. We have a bunch of questions for him. We tried to get some diversity in our questions from our alliance mates, but most of them were just posting troll questions. So we probably won't have too many questions that weren't crafted by Spill or myself. So yeah, I don't know. Anything you want to say before we get started? CCP Rise, is that what I'm calling you? CCP Rise? Is that what I'm going with?
I guess, yeah, you can call me that.
Okay.
No, I don't think I have too much. I mean, it sounds more like closing stuff, but make sure to participate in the features ideas section of the forums on balance. And let us know what you think of things. I feel like people who would listen to this would tend to be experienced and reasonable, yeah, and so it would help to have feedback on any of the changes we're making. We're pretty good at using feedback these days, so I don't know. It's like the closest thing to a plug I have. I don't know. I can't really mention Summerblink, and I don't really know what else I would say. So
yeah, definitely. So I'm actually jealous of your Summerblink sponsorship. I don't know how you did that, but maybe
I
one
don't
day.
either. I was pretty lucky.
Maybe one day people will give me ISK to explode spaceships, but until then, I'm still gonna have fun.
I have an entirely new kind of joy from Summerblink now because I've, by moving to CCP, found out how many CCPers are like hopeless, degenerate Summerblink gamblers who buy Plex to pay for their Summerblink addictions, which is just completely hilarious. So,
that's great.
providing
That's
me
really funny.
content no matter where I go, I guess.
Definitely. Okay, so let's just get right into the questions. The first one that I have down here is do you think all ships should have a role? So to elaborate a little bit on that is, do you think that every ship should be useful for something, or do you think that there's a place where some ships should just suck, or some ships should just be strictly worse at other things in the game? Yeah, I guess.
So, my answer, I don't know. So yes, I think every ship should have a role. That's like the simple version. But I think that my idea of role might be broader than maybe the average or than some kind of traditional definition, the way people think of role. So like for me, if a ship is like worse than another ship, which means people have lower expectations for it and therefore it like can do more things, then I'm happy with that potentially as a role, or at least as part of a role. And that's not the only example, but that sort of points to my kind of broad version of what a role means, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean that totally makes sense. And like, I'm a really big fan of ships that have really low expectations. I think that's like what contributes a lot to being able to successfully, solo or duo or small gang, roam, because you go out there with ships that everyone thinks are really strong, no one's going to fight you, even if they're not necessarily so strong. But you go out there with a ship that has a terrible expectation, then people are just going to jump on you and try and kill you.
Yep. And maybe another version of that is I think that it's okay, especially in a game like Eve where there's so much going on and there's so many different ways to play the game, for a ship's role to be fairly narrow or fairly uncommon. So maybe a close version of this, and like one that seems sort of biased based on the subject in general today, is the Hyperion. We talked a lot with the CSM when we were doing the battleship balance about the Hyperion, and a lot of people wanted to say that it doesn't have a role, or that the role isn't compelling enough to be worth that slot. And I think I tend to feel like it's fine in Eve for something to be really good at a role or really good at a particular thing, but that thing be not all that desirable. Whereas, like a Hyperion, it's not going to get used by big fleet people or wormhole people or even PvE people. It kind of is this weird, really strong ship, but in this kind of smaller space that's low sec or small scale PvPers most of the time, and occasionally it can get bent into other roles that maybe people don't expect from it. And um, I kind of like that, and that applies to a lot of different situations, I guess. But that's another space where I feel like the general, barrage of feedback we'd get would say this doesn't have enough of a role, and I would be like, oh, it has a role. There's something it's good for. There's people out there who are excited for it, and in a game with so much going on like Eve, it's cool for there to be smaller cases where the roles, basically, I guess all roles aren't equal, or all roles shouldn't be equal. That's
Yeah,
maybe a way to put it.
yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, I guess this kind of goes along with the next question, which is the only criticism I've ever heard of you is basically people saying that you're homogenizing all the ships. You're giving them all the same number of slots. You're making them, you're removing all the special snowflakiness out of it, and doing things like that. And like, you know, I don't know, how do you feel about that? Like when you hear that, I'm sure you've probably heard something similar to that before. I hope this isn't like a complete, you've never heard this before. But what do you think about that? Because I don't necessarily agree with it, but I'd like to hear your opinion first.
Well, I would start by refuting the idea that that's the only criticism I've gotten. I've gotten a wide range of criticisms spanning all types of, everything from rage to like that to, I don't know, a number of other things. So don't limit the ability of people to criticize to just that one little area. But I don't know. I think that's been really interesting. I've been thinking about that topic a lot. I think homogenization is sort of a cop out. Like knee-jerk reaction to a lot of balanced stuff. I think that it's often a reaction to things becoming balanced. I think that some people think that imbalance is like an interesting non-homogenized sort of quirkiness that should be praised, and that when we make things actually balanced, that's bad because it's homogenizing, and I definitely don't like that. But I also think there's been cases in the balance passes I've done where I've been kind of conservative. The industrials were an interesting case. I still feel like industrials are really just for carrying things around, and so it's not important for them to be super different. That's of course a kind of a biased PvP centric position to have, maybe. But I also gained a lot of respect for the fact that like it or not, there's 12 of those ships in the game, and the more different and interesting they can be, the more happy people are going to be. And I definitely understand that. So I guess I don't think any of the balance passes we've done have been like horrible and homogenizing, but I also think that when it's possible to create more flavor or more of a difference in character between different ships, or whatever, between different systems, or whatever it is you're talking about, that's probably a good thing. And so I'm the industrial balance especially kind of has me more focused on that aspect of future balance passes, that if I'm able to work in more racial character or more just more interesting features and without breaking anything, that I probably should. So I should at least think about that and try to find good ways to do that. And I don't know, it's interesting, like with the battleship rebalance, I kind of did that without thinking about it. Like looking back now after some of the other stuff that I've seen, both Fozzie's balances and mine since I've been here, I think the Armageddon change was kind of crazy, and a more conservative version of myself, like the one that did the industrial rebalances, might not have thought the Geddon change was like reasonable. But now looking back on it, I think that's the exact kind of character and like bigger sort of leap away from homogenization that people actually really like. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there's quite an answer for you, I guess.
No, and I appreciate it. Yeah, and I kind of agree. I think that like, what ships are used for, doesn't have much to do with whether they have the same number of slots between the highs, the mids, and the lows. And it comes down to the bonuses. It comes down to even things that I've like just recently started really appreciating, like the subtleness in different hull speeds and things like that. Like if you it's all of that stuff that there's so much that goes into it. And like people, I don't know, I think the biggest thing is, yeah, people are resistant to change, and like that's something that I really try and like avoid doing, because I feel like the faster I embrace change, the easier I'm going to be able to like figure out the new meta and be able to fly things that are strong before other people know they are. But I mean, maybe that's just me.
No, yeah, I mean, I think change definitely favors people who are paying attention and embrace it and are smart and figure out what to make of it. I One thing I thought of while you were saying that about like base stats and kind of what separates ships from one another or whatever in Eve. Something I've been doing, or at least did in some of my first balance passes, was tend to balance ships in the context of their class. So if I was going to balance cruisers, which I didn't, but if I was, I would take them all and put them all sort of next to each other and then balance them in relation to each other. And I think in the past, a lot of what's happened with Eve ships, and especially a lot of people's reactions, are based on just a view from that ship's perspective, and sometimes with the view to the wider perspective of how does this sort of relate to other classes, a class up or a class down or whatever. And that has a really big impact. I noticed that some things that seemed kind of drastic to me, like during the industrial changes, these variations from race to race within the industrials looked to me kind of dramatic because there just wasn't much room sort of within the small space that the class as a whole kind of took up. But then when you kind of, I don't know, got outside that view or even just looked within the context of the ship by itself, it changed things a lot. So people who have been flying in Iteron 5 forever are going to react a lot differently to a proposed change for the Iteron 5 than someone who's looking at all of the ship stats next to each other. And I'm not saying one or the other is right, but it's definitely kind of, I think that is what some of the idea of homogenization resulted from, is from putting all the ships side by side and kind of trying to make them all, I don't know, balanced within that context rather than within, the context of what they've been doing forever in Eve, or within the context of, I don't know, their role in relation to the rest of the meta or something like that as a particular ship rather than as a class.
Yeah, definitely. And so that kind of makes me think about something that one of the questions I thought about earlier in the week. But so yeah, like when I'm thinking like, okay, I'm gonna come up with a, like I'll write down these like mini soft requirements like 30k projection, ship moves, this fast, etc., etc. And then I'll go through and I'll like open up, I use Python, but I'll open up, 5 or 6 different ships and try and put them in that role and see which one does it best. And they're all of different races. They all use different weapon systems. They all use different, this and that. And I mean, with some of the changes, like to the, and I know this probably isn't you who did it, but the changes to like the the racial, now you need racial destroyer to fly, racial cruiser to fly, racial battle cruiser. I mean, is that pushing people to fly like a single race? Because I fly every single race's ships. I use every single weapon system, but I mean, there's a lot bigger barrier to entry to doing that. And like, is that intentional or like what? I mean, how do you feel about like that idea that it's a lot harder for people to just, yes, I have Battlecruiser 5, so I jump in every single battlecruiser. I train medium blasters, and guess what? I can fly any blaster boat. Galenti or Caldari. I don't know. What do you think about
that? So I think with most of the skill changes, the sort of like the barrier you're talking about, those changes really are not being made. They're being made with barriers and time into a particular ship or time to cross train to a ship in mind. We don't want to make like, we want to avoid either creating drastic new barriers to entering something that before wasn't as hard, or the opposite, making something really easy to get into that used to be harder. We want to avoid those big changes as much as possible, but those are not the reason for any of the changes. It's like something that we're thinking about, but I think most of those changes are driven by the idea that hopefully some of the progression in Eve makes sense, and the way it's originally set up often doesn't. Eterbium, who's kind of leading a lot of that stuff, has a very, I don't know what the right word is. People at work say German, like very organized, kind of. If it, yeah, and like intuitive is a good word. Like a system of progression or a system of organization that you would guess how things would be set up. So when you train from frigate, like you get a racial frigate skill, it opens up all the Minmatar frigates. You would expect that when you got into destroyers, you would get all the Minmatar destroyers, and so it's weird how it like all of a sudden destroyers are all races, and then you go back to racial for cruisers, and then you go back to all races for battle cruisers, and that's what's driving that is that as you know, a big part of Eve's problems are accessibility. Like people, it takes forever for people to figure out how Eve works, and a lot of what Eterbium's doing is trying to address some of that by making things actually make sense. And you'll actually see more of that coming down the pipe. He really is excited about that sort of goal, and a lot of the rest of the company is too. So you haven't seen the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and to touch on that, like the skill, like how the skills are arranged, got changed with this patch too, and I'd forgotten that happened. And then like I opened up my skill queue last night. I'm like, oh, I know where like all the skills are now. So that's something really nice even for like an old player.
Oh my god, I can find things.
Yeah, like personally, like I always had trouble like finding the shield skills. Like I could just never remember where they were. I'm like, oh, there's a section for shield. So stuff like that, I think is really good. So I guess kind of a good follow-up question to that is, do you think that the barrier for entry for like a noob into PvP is like, I guess it's hard to define like too high or too low, like skill-wise. But do you guys have kind of like a bar you set, kind of like where you would want someone to enter into like being able to PvP, or do you just want someone like a week old being able to go out there and like shoot people, I guess?
I mean, I think anyone would say that we would want people to be able to just get into whatever type of gameplay they want very early. I think the reality is that that's difficult for a lot of reasons. Mostly just that figuring out how things work and how to actually do that is so overwhelming for new players that even if there were systems in place that somehow supported it, it would be really challenging. But yeah, I think everybody would want new players to be able to do whatever it is they want in the sandbox as soon as they get there. If you want to fight other people, great. If you want to be a market trader, great. If you want to build things, great. Like I think everybody's really over the idea that there's some, like waiting period before you get to play the game the way you want. And nobody should have to, do some gameplay they hate for weeks while they train. Like that's really, really bad. And I think actually that's another thing you're going to see us working more and more on, is just trying to break down barriers that are keeping people from playing the game in the way that they want to when they first start. It's a tough goal, but it's a really valuable one, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really exciting. I mean, even though, I'm able to play the game how I want right now, like, there's plenty of games I've played in the past where I would easily be like, hey, friend, try this game out. Eve is not that kind of game. I know that it's going to be like me babysitting them for the next 6 months. And I try, but sometimes it just never works out. That it's exciting to see it getting easier for people to start playing.
Yeah, it's so tough. I tried to get a bunch of people to play, and it's like, even if you work really hard on it, it's a kind of a dice roll of whether or not they'll manage to stick. I think people have to kind of find a love for it on their own. I think a lot of it is about how people's personalities match up with it. Like there's some friends who I've just realized, like, no matter what I do or no matter what kind of experience they have, this isn't going to be a game they want to play. But there's a lot of people on the opposite end where I think it is a game they completely would love if they could get through those entry barriers. And it's, just a matter of working on that, breaking those down so that people who would really love it actually can get to that point rather than just getting put off by all the difficult stuff early on.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so next question. And it's kind of a broad question, but are you happy with where the small gang and solo meta is? And you can address solo or small gang or either or both. And what could be better about it? What do you think still needs some help?
Meta is the term that makes it sort of a question I'm not sure where to go with. Do you mean like, where?
I guess,
I don't know, like ship by ship meta, or like just the sort of really broad state of the game?
Yeah, just the state of small gang and solo. If you don't want to get in a 1,000-man fleet and hit F1, where is Eve for you? How happy are you with that? What could be better?
So, I don't know. I guess there's a lot of answers from my perspective as a small gang player. Like, my playstyle, the way that I've liked playing the game forever, I think things have just gotten better and better. I think Eve's in one of the coolest places it's ever been in terms of um, the health of balance, for one, is just amazing right now compared to where it's been in the past. And yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, from my perspective, it feels really good. I think if you break it down into some smaller pieces, there's parts I'm really unhappy with. Um, I personally still don't feel very satisfied with LoSec right now. It feels kind of weird to me. I would love things like getting more activity in general, like more, more people moving around and doing things in all of Space 00, especially. So there was
Definitely.
just more things to do. And I think some higher level stuff, like just improving the tools players have to find fights or to organize with each other. There's a lot of room for improvement on a lot of that stuff. Things like the star map or the social interfaces in the game, or I don't know. A lot of this kind of stuff could probably
Yeah.
improve as well.
Yeah. So okay. So actually, talking about the star map, that kind of moves me into this other question, and getting people to move around in nullsec. There's two questions on here that I have. That one is like, and I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm thinking globally enough. Maybe I'm thinking too much about PvP. But what do you think about like maybe a system that would show people when bosses were coming out of like reinforced, like all over the Eve map, so that everyone everywhere could see these timers without jumping in the systems? Like, do you think that would be a good change or a really bad change for people who own Sov? Would that like de-incentivize Sov too much, or would that be awesome because everyone would know where these battles were about to happen?
I think probably that would be fine. I am really good at getting excited about things before thinking them through completely and realizing that they're terrible, but at a glance that seems great to me. I would think that anyone who like was on the level where um uh Sov mattered, like alliance level people, they're always going to know those timers anyway. And so that, this would more just like be beacons for smaller groups who wanted to see where there was stuff going on and get to those places faster. It could have the opposite effect, that people would avoid those places and know that to stay safe, they shouldn't
Yeah.
go there. But yeah, I mean,
I mean,
on
it
the
feels
face of it,
like
I like that.
yeah, it feels like something like you've got 5 or 6 of you, and you open up the map and you're like, hey, there's a timer coming out 10 jumps away. Let's roll over there and see what's happening. Maybe like kind of a beacon that would generate random groups to show up to these. I don't know, something like that.
Yep.
Yep. And then the other one,
I
which
mean, we
obviously,
have, like, what's
no, go
interesting
ahead.
to me is we have a bunch of that kind of information in the star map now. Like, that piece we don't, and that might be a good piece to have there. But there's a bunch of information about where people are and how many people are getting killed and how many people are docked and all this stuff. But it's presented in a way that I think almost nobody uses.
Yeah,
A lot of people
it's
do, but
tough.
I think a lot of people don't. And if there was, I always imagine like the planet side map where there's like the explosions in the part of the map where there's stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's something
Like if
to
if we consolidated
really easily see
all
it.
those pieces of information we have and just like slapped them on the map, and or had like another PlanetSide parallel. It's funny, I don't even play PlanetSide, but like you can, like, if you could have like set destination to closest timer with uh, some kind of constraints or whatever. Like, basically, I don't want to do any work to find out where I can go to die, but like help
Yeah.
me do it quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't want instanced PvP, but at the same
No.
time, making it so I know where I can find fights, or at least where there's a chance. Obviously, you get blue balled or whatever all the time, and that's just a part of it. You find a system with 50 people in it, and they're all in the station. You can't do anything about that. But then I guess that actually kind of goes into this next question is, and this might be too radical, but what do you think about like something that would force people to undock and fight, like or something that and I guess I'll elaborate a little bit on it, but like, what if there was, something you could like anchor in a system that would stop people from nomming until they killed it? I mean, would that be too much for, something to make people? Because the most common response that I find when we get a random wormhole into, nullsec and people are ratting is they dock up and they sit there and they wait for me to leave. Um, is there any way to incentivize them to kick me out? Because it seems like the only thing that they do now is just make me die of boredom and then I leave.
So this will be my first and maybe not last terrible tease, but you should watch the for winter expansion announcements. We're possibly talking about some stuff like this. Not this thing specifically, but I think we are generally very interested in letting people interact at a smaller level in a meaningful way, where you will be able to hopefully have more of an effect on the behavior of people who may not want to interact with you.
And, okay, see that's really exciting.
Again, like, yeah, it's not this, and I can't do a bunch of details, and I don't even know what's happening in winter necessarily, but I know that we're talking plenty about ways, to have an impact on things at a smaller scale. At like, I don't have to take SOV in a system to have an impact on your behavior. I can maybe do something else like that, like, steal your money, or make things worse for you in some way, or whatever.
Yeah.
So kind of like I guess what people call like the farm and fields effect, where like a small group of people can kind of like not take over SOV, but disrupt things enough to make it people on dock. Okay.
Exactly. And I think, we still have a problem with the farm side of that as well. Or the, I guess farm and fields are kind of the same thing, but like, I think that we still have problems with, it's very easy to come up with ways to disrupt someone's farming if they're running anoms, but the best response for them still a lot of the time is just going to be to dock up. And so we have to work on creating, what if to farm the fields you can go out and build a mining harvesting thing that's great, but someone can come along and destroy it. And so even if someone shows up and you dock up, some of your assets are vulnerable, but you want to have them there because they're really lucrative in the meantime, and so you end up with things in space people can fight for. And I think we're gonna have some issues with that side of it as well, that just docking up and avoiding fights is always going to be a good option for people, so we have to figure out ways to draw them out, but we're working on it. I think everybody would like that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's exciting. Okay, so then kind of backtracking a little bit, but I mean, this is a pretty obvious question, but do you still play Eve? And if so, do you solo?
Yeah, I actually have been playing Eve. It's kind of exciting. When I first moved, I was like, I've explained like a billion times by now, so I feel kind of bad for repeating for some people, but they lock your accounts up, so you don't get, like, I couldn't play Kill 2 for 6 months, basically after moving, or a little before moving, I guess, since I had them lock it early. And then in the meantime, you can create new characters, which I did do. I played a little bit on a new character, but I didn't love that. It's hard to switch. And then I got Kill 2 back recently, so I have been playing, and I have been soloing, and it's pretty fun.
Nice. So kind of similar playstyle as before. Like, I know I talked to CCP Fozzie at an event, and he couldn't give me too much detail, but he said like now he plays in LowSec, and he wouldn't tell me what kind, faction warfare, this or that. But but yeah, that idea. So like you are able to play still. Obviously, I'm assuming since you're so recognizable, you can't like communicate with people on voice comms or anything like that. But you are still playing soloing.
Yep, I'm pretty restricted socially. I think I could have worked a lot harder to make playing socially a little more possible, but since I don't really play socially anyway, it wasn't a huge deal for me. So I solo, and I also play with other CCPers. We have actually a weekly corp or a CCP roam, basically, which I've FC'd a couple of and played on several of. And then also there's some people at CCP who are genuinely want to learn more about small scale PvP. So I've done some smaller duo and trio PvP with some of them, and soloing too. So yeah, I've gotten to play a pretty decent amount.
Would you say you're like the best at CCP? Is there anyone there better than you at the game?
Best is so relative.
Sure.
Me and Fozzie had we had a 1v1 cruiser tournament to test the new tournament tool this year, and he's pretty good. I think he is a better theory crafter than me for sure. and he flew very well also. So I don't know which of us would be better, but I still, for my super weird playstyle that almost nobody uses, I'm probably the best.
Nice. That's what I would
like nobody can find fights in nullsec or in like deep sov nullsec on their own as well as I can. That's for sure.
Yeah, I don't know, it's a lot of fun. Like I think that's one of the things I do try and do a lot of is actually getting fights. And when I first started, it ended up in me just dying before everyone would land or killing whatever I was trying to, fight before people would land and things like that. But yeah, I definitely people definitely, not to stoke my own fire or anything, but people definitely kind of look at me as like that person who goes out and then they pick a fight and then they need help from like their, their older brother or whatever coming to save them out in nullsec, because that's how a lot of our fights start, is me going out there and being like, hey, there's 10 dudes who have formed up to kill me, and then inevitably they all dock when we have more than 2 people. But it's yeah, I don't know how it happens. I don't know what your tricks are, but it's something that's definitely, I don't know how to teach it. I don't know how to teach people to get people to undock and fight them.
Yeah, it's kind of it is funny when there's been a couple people that I've spent a lot of time with who I try and like explain how I get really weird engagements, and it usually, like, I found myself the other day with a guy from CCP, and I was like just warping us around like crazy. We were in one system, and I was just fleet warping us all over the place until eventually we got a pretty cool like 2v3. And I realized afterwards, like, I don't know how to explain why I was doing any of those things. Sorry.
Yeah, it's good though. I don't know. It's something, I guess it just comes with experience, and like you do weird things sometimes, and maybe it's superstition or whatever, but it inevitably works and you get fights. So, okay. So I guess next question that I have is and I'll couple these two together. But what do you think in the realm of solo or small gang? What do you think is underrated and needs like more attention? People need to be like wake up and realize it's good. And what do you think is overrated? What do you think people have been like flying too much of because they think it's good, but it's not actually that good?
I don't know. People are pretty smart. Probably whatever they're doing is probably what they ought to be doing. um, I was, I don't know. I've been sort of had the idea that battleships are actually pretty good again at small scales since I gave up on them a while back. Like I originally flew tons of battleships and then moved more and more towards fast stuff as I like got better and the meta changed or whatever. But there's so many like cruisers around these days, and battleships are actually pretty good at killing cruisers. So I think battleship, like have you seen the new like Guados vid? The like
I don't think I have.
Samurai Revenge or whatever.
Oh, okay, yeah, definitely.
He did a like the most recent one. There's a bunch of Hyperion in it, and he's just fighting gangs of like 20 people that are in cruisers, and of course he's like linked and has every possible thing to scale his repping and stuff. But in a way, watching it, I was like, I think this is actually, I think that the old school, like I'm on a gate and a Vindicator brawling a bunch of people down, I think that's actually more possible now than it was for a while. I think it's more possible now than it was like when Hurricanes and Drakes were the only thing people flew. I think that was like the sort of era that made battleships really impossible, and I think actually now they're more possible again. And that's going to be even more true after like 1.1's link and local rep changes. So
yeah.
I don't know. That's kind of a thing, and there's been changes to battleship weapons like cruise missiles too that help with that. But I don't know. In general, go ahead, Spill. I want you to talk more, Spill. Go.
Okay. Yeah, I guess kind of like going from like that question. Like the next question I had was like, so in Odyssey 1.1, we're getting a buff to active tanking, which is awesome. Via modules and also like changes like the Vagabond and the Deimos. And maybe possibly the Bastion mode for Marauders, which Face and I are both super stoked on. But do you think like buffing active repping is going to incentivize like more solo and small gang PvP? Because you don't necessarily need like dudes and logistics ships, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know. I think probably. I think for it to incentivize small gang PvP or solo PvP as a whole, like looking at, the sum of the way people spend their time, it would have to make solo kind of more powerful on the whole, right? And maybe it is, like maybe that's true, but I think there's a lot of pretty powerful ways to solo now by kiting mostly. And I think probably what'll happen is a lot of people who want to solo, like that's already how they want to spend their time, will move from doing it in whatever they've been doing it in previously, probably, attack BCs or maybe kiting cruisers or whatever. And they'll start, giving a really legitimate shot to active base ships more often. Which is great. I think that's really good to have kind of more diversity in there. And I especially like that active ships, I think, have some of the highest like skill sort of cap on them in terms of just managing your ship correctly. And I think the sort of people who like solo and small scale stuff really like high skill cap. So I think that it's got to be exciting for people who are doing solo and small gang stuff to have the option to do more active tank ships. But I don't know if it'll increase sort of the solo and small gang prevalence overall in the game. I hope so, but
yeah, I guess if maybe nothing else, like it'll like let the veteran players like with the high skill points like oh, like here's something new we can do, but part of it too is I guess mindset of wanting to go out there and like do solo and small gang stuff, because it can be hard when like you jump into a system and then 20 dudes form to fight your one ship or two ships. So
yeah. And I think that's actually sort of another, like, I don't know how that plays into it exactly, but I think trying to run active tank ships, trying to run anything that brawls is probably less forgiving than doing some kind of burn around and avoid damage thing. Both are hard to manage, but I think if someone's like, oh, active tanking is better now, but it's bad in fleets, so I should try being in a small gang, and they run off in their Brutix or something, they're probably gonna have a terrible time, and I don't know if they'll get one over. Maybe though.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. Yeah, it's tough. Like brawling is really rough, I think, and I think that's just kind of where it is, and I don't know. I can't brain any kind of fix for it, because
one
you have
awesome
to
thing. Yeah, but that's actually one thing that's changing, which is sweet. Like Coverix showing everybody that you can kite with active setups.
It blew my mind, and I've been flying a non-Navy Omen because I'm a peasant. But I've been having a lot of fun with it, a lot of success. I actually made a PvP commentary, and like I don't know, I'm planning on uploading it soon, and like a lot of this I rewatched it a couple times while making the commentary over the top of it. It's just me getting really lucky, like luckily guessing where the target I wanted was, on like the 5 Celestials. He just happened to be the one I warped to. Like as I enter warp, all my modules are still repping, and like my ancillary repper is still reloading, and I land on him right as I finish. Like it looks really pro, but it was actually just me getting really lucky. But yeah, like Coverix's video definitely inspired me to be, trying all these things. Where even with like the new the rail changes and stuff, we've been coming up with fits that use rails and have active tank and kite and things like that. So we're excited about it.
Yep. Yeah, I think there's a lot more options. Like his video showed sort of this one really cool application, but there's a lot of others. I think that was a big response to the Vagabond changes, is like people think that it's supposed to brawl now, but it's really not. It's supposed to kite, but it can kite with an active tank, which is kind of new territory, but it's actually really exciting territory. It's really fun to fly active tank kite ships, and it's actually in a lot of cases, it's a better way to use active tanks because you can mitigate damage through range when you need to.
Yeah, I really like that. Like the fun thing with kiting is like you need like good active piloting skills instead of just like hitting buttons, but then like being able to sustain yourself for longer on field, and being able to like potentially like prolong the engagement so you can shoot more dudes is really awesome. So I really like that, especially the armor rig changes to for the active repping armor rig changes. I was like, that's awesome, so
yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so then what else do we have here? Okay, so kind of ad-libbing again here, but what do you think about like ECM still? How do you feel about it? Is it still broken? Is it still shit? Should it be removed completely from the game still? Well, I mean, how do you feel about ECM? Because I know, especially when you're soloing, there's nothing. I mean, me like I've almost like flipped my desk before when I get caught in like a Saber Falcon camp, and I'm in like a turret ship. I don't have FOF missiles, and I can't do anything, and I just sit there and I die, and I slow boat toward the gate crying. Like, I don't know, and that's just maybe me or whatever. But how do you feel about ECM? Where is that at? Is it going anywhere else? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I feel pretty much the same as I have for quite a while. There was a while where I felt like ECM was like broken, overpowered, and I was really mad about it and didn't want to play Eve. But for quite a while now, it has not been broken, overpowered. It still feels super overpowered when you're by yourself or when you're in a really small gang. But on the whole, in Eve, it's actually pretty underpowered, and so I'm not worried about power. I'm not like, don't expect me to be like nerfing ECM range by a little bit.
Sure.
But I still hate the mechanic. I think it's one of the least fun combat interactions in Eve, maybe the least fun. And yeah. I just would like to do something that makes the gameplay that comes out of ECM more interesting, and then we can worry about balance after that. But it would be really nice to do something that was just a mechanical overhaul that changed it from this horrible chance-based binary effect that is miserable for everyone into something that people are actually pretty happy to fly and happy to fly against, because it provides cool decision-making and whatever. What that is much harder to say. I'm trying to find something. Like, we talk about it now and then, and I keep my ears to the ground. I know people have been suggesting changes for it for a really long time, and I feel like if we get an idea we're really happy and excited about, we will work to get it put in, but we're not there quite yet. Another problem with it is that it's gonna be a lot of work. Like, ripping out a whole EWAR system and replacing it basically is just a lot of work. It's not impossible. I don't think we're necessarily limited technically or something like that. I've seen people say that kind of thing, that like, oh, legacy code, rabble, we can't actually, they're never going to do anything. But it's definitely not that. It's just a matter of having something valuable enough that we're willing to, for instance, make me sit and author new stats for an entire release to replace all of ECM.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
But yeah, hopefully we can do that.
So then to kind of go along with it, it's not the same. But I mean, what do you feel about like links? Obviously, there's some new changes to links that make them less annoying or overpowered. You can't activate them in a POS now. They're a little weaker, things like that. But I mean, I know you never really use links or scouts or whatever in a lot of your videos and stuff like that. And was that because you thought they were stupid, or was that because or broken or whatever, or was that? I guess this is a two-part question. You never use this stuff. Is that because you just didn't want to be running a bunch of accounts, or is it because you didn't think it was in the some people say, oh well, it's one player flying 5 accounts or whatever. Do you think that's solo? And I guess the other thing is, where do you feel links are at? Where do you think their place is? I guess in the game.
All right. Let's see. So I never flew links for 2 reasons. One, I'm lazy. That's the primary reason. I hate managing 2 characters at once, and I am bad at it, and it just sucks. I used to, even before link alts were a common thing, even before Falcon alts were a common thing, I did a lot of trying to dual box 2 battleships, or something, just fly 2 combat ships. And it's just miserable. I mean, links are easier, of course, but I'm just very, very lazy. I've always pretty much only had 1 Eve account. Yeah, so that's a big reason for it. And then the other reason is that I'm not really actually into, I don't care so much about the honor PvP thing. I don't think people who use 5 accounts, even though they're one person, are worse or something. But I think that I can get plenty of gameplay without them and I'm gonna be equally challenged pretty much no matter what. Like what
Yeah.
I like is trying to figure out what to do and how to like make the best of it. And no matter where I set my bar, that experience is gonna be really similar. So if I'm flying like a Tech 1 Fit Rifter, I can have that experience. Or if I'm flying a Loki linked like Snake Macarial, I can have that experience. The only thing that really changes between those two situations is your engagement profile. And
Yeah.
I was always pretty happy with my like I always felt like I could get enough fights that I didn't need to. I feel like I know some people feel like they need to have links so that they can engage the things that are around, and I can understand that mentality, but I never felt that too much personally, so I just didn't worry about it. But that doesn't mean and sort of attached to that, maybe more importantly, even though I don't care too much about the space honor thing, a lot of other people do, and I think if you try and make videos or make content where you're using a lot of extra resources, people don't like it as much, and I always wanted people to like it a lot. So being the underdog who doesn't have all the extra advantages earns you some extra like street cred. And in a way, I think that people aren't crazy for that. I think the one thing that happens when people are watching content or listening to it or whatever, when it's based around a lot of these force multipliers, is that they have a hard time wrapping their head around what someone's actually capable of. So if Coverx is flying a Macarial with links and implants and stuff, most people haven't actually been in that situation or flown that ship, so they have no idea how to relate to what the ship's capable of. So they know that he's fighting big fleets and killing a bunch of people, but they don't necessarily know that it's impressive. They kind of are like, but I know all those things are really powerful, and I don't really know how powerful, so I'm not sure whether to be impressed or not. Whereas if you're making a video where you're like killing 2 cruisers with a Rifter, everybody's flown a Rifter, so they can all relate to how hard that is to do, and then they get more excited about it. I always wanted to like tap into that as much as I could. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was just agreeing. I think that's really powerful. Is like you can go get like really engaging PvP without having to have all these extra things, and also like I think for a lot of people like having to set up like link alts and stuff, just like the ISK, the SP, and time-wise, like it's a lot for a lot of people, to be honest. It's like there is like a lot of overhead to getting there, and so it's like, well, to be that good like takes even more time, and so I think it takes focus away from actually developing personal paladin skills versus just like, oh, I can have links and I'll make up for it, kind of.
Yeah, the big one, I mean, I think, yeah, that's definitely true. One part of it for sure is that I was always able to measure how much fun I was having or how successful I was based on just, I think I've maybe heard you say this too, but just off of like how well I handled the situation I was in, like how smart my decisions were, how much I made of what I actually had in front of me. But I know a lot of other people want to measure their success other ways. And if you're, for instance, trying to measure how successful you are by how many people you kill, you want links. Like you're going to kill more people if you have links. And I can understand that, but that was just never I was never super concerned with that, probably because my primary thing was always just trying to get the best footage I could for videos, and that doesn't really matter how many people I kill. It just matters that, the situations I'm in are actually productive. But I think for other people, that's not the case.
Yeah, definitely. And so something kind of along with the links, like what about drugs? Do you use drugs? In game, do you use drugs? Like
I don't use drugs in real life. I'm super straight edge.
Sure.
FYI.
but in game, like how much of a junkie are you? Do you like? I've just recently started using them, and it's kind of nice, but sometimes I get stupid side effects. Sometimes I think I don't really see a downside to it, but I'm not sure like what if there even is a problem in the kind of solo small game community. I don't know if there is a problem with people using drugs, but how do you feel about them? Do you think they're good? Do you think they were an awesome thing? What do you think?
I like them generally. I tried to start switching to using them more often. I think they were a very good way for me to like expand how much ISK I was spending once I started to add more of it. It was kind of a nice, slightly lower effort and slightly lower impact way to use my ISK to get a little more juice out of my ships, which is really cool. But actually the laziness factor kind of ended up like I really hate the like carrying drugs through high sec. I just like makes me so mad, and so I've always been based in a high sec market, so I pretty much stopped using them because of that. I try to now and then, especially if I'm flying something that really depends on a strong active tank, I will. But yeah,
can you like undock and take your drugs and then just fly wherever you're going and hope you get a fight within an hour?
Yes, you can take them while you're docked and then fly wherever you want. And I actually did do that for a while. Like just pop a standard and then fly off to fight and die within an hour and you're good. The problem with that I found is you take the drugs, you get a side effect, and then you just don't play Eve.
Like you just log out for an hour or whatever.
Yes, and then log back on. I remember really specifically, I had an Eagle. Someone really wanted me to have a video like fight in an Eagle. So I had this like probably it was XLASB Eagle or something. And there was like a night where 3 times in a row I took a blue pill in the station, got a side effect, logged off, tried again in an hour. Same thing happened like 3 times in a row, and I never went out in the Eagle. And I was like, okay, I probably shouldn't do this anymore.
Yeah, that's rough. Like sometimes I've had some bad experiences. Like I'm running from a gang. They have like Lokis and bubbles and all this stuff, and I'm in a regular Omen, and I pop a drop, and it gets me like the negative shield effect and the negative speed effect, and I'm like, this is stupid. I should just die. Like I should just self-destruct right now. Like
yeah, they can be kind of a bummer. But I actually kind of, I mean, even though I really don't like to take it and, well, even though it can be kind of bad, I generally like that kind of effect. Like,
yeah,
I'm not as much of a min-maxer and more of like something silly will happen if I do this, and so that they fit me pretty well.
Definitely, yeah. Like there's definitely something to be said about that, for sure.
I just want to get rid of that stupid box that freezes your. I want a checkbox that says pay all customs fines forever. Yeah. And never have to see that dumb box again and just fly around with my drugs all day.
Yep.
That'd be awesome.
Not gonna happen, but we can dream.
So Spill, you had a question, I think, about like the target spectrum breaker, which I actually don't know anything about at all, but
okay. Yeah, so I don't know how much experience you have with this CCP Rise, but something that I had forgotten about until like 3 or 4 days ago was like the target spectrum breaker, which only works for like battleship size holes, but essentially, if anyone's listening, like what it does is like it will break the locks of anyone who has you targeted, kind of like a targeted ECM burst. And the more people that have you targeted, the more chance that it'll actually break those locks. And the video I saw it with was it was these guys flying Balagorns, and they kept getting targeted by the enemies, and then they would cycle that, and from the enemy's point of view, you could hear them going like, why are we losing locks on these Balagorns when we're trying to kill them? And I was like, that's really genius. Like, you know, that's something that's really powerful. So what would you think of like adding something like that for like a battle cruiser size hull? You know, like something you could toss onto like a triple rep merm, you know, in case like 10 dudes try to come and kill you. You're like, I can't tank that, but if I can cycle this every once in a while, like it increases my chances by a lot.
So I want to preface with, I have like 0 experience with the mod. I know of it, and I probably could have done the same explanation you just did, but I haven't actually used it, and I haven't even looked at it internally really at all. So yeah, that can kind of color my response, I guess. But I don't know. I feel like I don't know. I think that you could extend it to other ships, or to, like, I know for instance right now, I think the problem, or part of the problem with it, is that it's meant for a really large scale, so it's balanced towards having like, you know, hundreds of people lock you rather than having only 12 or 15 or whatever a small scale person would be fighting against. And it basically it would be really difficult to balance towards smaller fights without wrecking bigger fights. But additionally, I feel like it's the same as ECM, where balance aside, it's not very fun for, if you're in the triple red merm and you're unlucky, it doesn't do anything for you and you're pissed off. And if you're in the other ships and this merm just all of a sudden neutralizes your entire fleet's damage and escapes, you're pissed off. And so even though like I'm sure it could be extended and possibly could be balanced, I think it's probably always going to irritate people. So I'm not so sure that I would want to like add more of them to the game, but I would be open to a discussion about it.
Yeah, like it was just something that I saw and I totally forgot about. I'm like, that's really like it's an interesting mechanic in some ways. Like
I
like you
definitely like one thing I like about it is the idea of like things behaving in different ways based on how many people are around. We actually, I don't think there's as many of those mechanics as there could be in Eve. Like we have mostly things that are just, you know, a ship performing an action on one other ship, and then we have a few things that scale like infinitely, like gang links, where like the more people you have, the more you get out of them, and it's just completely unbounded. But I don't see any reason. Like I was, you know, I don't know if you guys saw my bad ideas thread, but I have bad ideas all the time. But one of them, you know, what if you had a ship that went faster the more ships were within 30k of it, or something like that?
That would be amazing.
That would be amazing.
That would be the
Like-
only ship I ever.
It's probably like obviously it's kind of ridiculous example, but it sort of is the same purpose as the lockbreaker, that like you have some performance change based on the number of people that are around you or whatever, shooting at you or whatever it is. But you could look for mechanics that are fun. So you have like, if you want to tackle that guy, you can't send your whole fleet. You have to send like, you know, only a couple people. And that kind of thing I think is really interesting, and I would love if we could do more of that. But yeah, I'm not sure the lockbreaker is the way to go. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, the thing about that too is like I've thought about, or like I've seen discussions about like, well, what if you only have, you know, like modules for like certain size gangs, but then you have a sandbox game and then you put like hard limits on certain things. And so it doesn't seem like it has like good synergy, I guess you could say, with like the sandbox idea of, you know, like having open world stuff and letting it be player driven.
Yeah, I really, as much as possible. I mean, it's of course, you know, going back to the role idea, like things are kind of going to be meant for certain types of uses, but I'd really like to avoid any kind of like hard barrier around how things work. And actually, there's some examples of that now in the game, which I probably wouldn't have done, like the faction warfare plexes, which I know people have totally mixed opinions about, but like those kind of hard, like only frigs here, or only when there's 30 people, or you know, those kind of things. I agree with you. They're not as sandboxy, and they kind of limit creativity. And I don't know. I like things that are more open-ended if possible.
Yeah. Well, I know like one thing that like was really nice about the faction warfare plexes. It's like, well, I'm in a destroyer, so I know if I go into like a novice, or not a novice, but like a small. The only thing I can be like engaging in are like certain things, so you know you're not gonna like have like a gang of cruisers land on you all of a sudden.
But I'm saying take that out all the way. Like, okay, you like having it limited to where you're only going to be against small ships. Why not limit it to literally just destroyers? And then you have a site with only destroyers. Why not limit it to destroyers with only Tech 2 guns? And then why not limit it to destroyers with you know
why not limit it to
like,
you queue up and you get put in an instance where you 1v1 a destroyer with the exact same ship. Only cormorants, and they 1v1, you know, like it does.
I would play the shit out of that, actually. No, but like it's kind of silly to be that extreme, but I think that's the problem when you set up these hard barriers, is you just sort of limit the game space, and I think people are going to have a more positive experience generally when they feel like they're in an open game space. Like that's why people want to be in Eve, is because they want they want as few boundaries on their behavior and on their decision making as possible. And the more you kind of move towards trying to, force them into this bound up space, I think in the end, the more, the more you lose from the like overall experience.
Yeah, and I think something to kind of like back up that point is like when I'm in faction warfare space and I like descan over to novice and I see a condor in there, I'm like, nope, he's linked and he's probably just going to cap me at 40k. And I don't even warp to it. I just leave. So
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So last quick question before we start wrapping things up. For missiles, do you think missiles should have a tracking enhancer, or at least any kind of other mod other than the ballistic control unit, or do you think they're fine?
Winter tease number 2.
yes.
No, yes, probably there should be some extra stuff there. I don't know exactly what it should be or how it should work, but I think CCP Fozzie does, and I know. I said something in a thread in features and ideas. Actually, I don't remember. I was responding to someone about missile related thing and sort of hinted at this, and it like got to be a top Reddit post, and everybody's like, guaranteed for winter tracking enhancers for missiles or something. Which is not the case. Like, we are able to screw up and delay releases pretty much always, but yes, we would like to have more mods around missiles. Keep your eyes open.
Awesome. Okay. Well, so then I don't know. Any closing questions, Phil, that you might have before we?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. Cool. So then after everything we've said, anything that you would want to add, like that maybe you felt like I didn't ask you a question about, or that you want to any winter teases you want to give us, that I haven't unlocked by asking the right questions, anything like that. CCP
Rise. I was working on a new ship today. Yay.
Okay. Is that like a real thing? Are there going to be new ships at some point ever, or?
Yeah, actually, there's I think that's sort of the most consistent commitment by CCP development is there will always be new ships.
Wow. Okay,
I'm not sure that's the case, but I don't know. I don't think there's anything big to add otherwise. I don't know. I guess I've been thinking a lot about Marauders lately because we've been trying to get those kind of buttoned down. Those are up for discussion in features and ideas. That we put up a new update today that changed things a little bit, and they're pretty interesting. They're going to be a really big change, like one of the most sort of out of left field, weird mechanic changes in quite a while, and I think that's really positive. They feel very sandboxy to me. Like I have no idea, and I'm honestly kind of scared of what people are going to figure out they can be used for. But yeah. I don't know. Yeah, go. Like I said, go participate in discussion for those as much as you're willing to. They're definitely kind of in a state of flux. I know Eterbium made some changes today, so it's pretty exciting though. I think they might be the first class of ship that has actually forced me to break my comfort zone and spend $2 billion on something to PvP in.
I'm really excited about it. I think they're going to be fantastic. Okay.
Did you see the update today that he put the web bonuses back on all of them?
I'm reading that right now, and I'm really excited. So, the Kronos and the Paladin have a 7.5 bonus to velocity factor for stasis webifiers. Used to be 10% for both of them, so that's actually really cool.
Yeah. And did he give web bonuses to the Vargar and Golem also, or did he? I think he might have.
For the Golem, there's a 10% effectiveness to target painters, and for the Vargar, there's... Oh, he did give the 7.5% bonus to the Vargar, so that's pretty cool.
Okay. Yeah, and TP for the Golem, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So really quick, sorry. I would be remiss without asking this, but changes to Tech 3s. Can you give us any idea what is going to happen there? People seem to think you're going to nerf them to the ground and want me to burn you at the stake for that. Something about them being specific or unspecific. Do you know when changes are going to happen, and if so, what do you think is going to happen?
So I don't know when. I wish I could give a timeline, but they're kind of on the short list now. The pattern for balancing is pretty obvious now that we kind of working our way up from the bottom, and the stuff at the top is much scarier and will take more time to finish, but we're getting there. Tech 3 cruisers and capitals have to come up before too long. They're just all that's left pretty much. So it won't be too long, but it also won't be right away. It's not probably going to be winter. As far as what we're doing, I wouldn't. I don't know. I likely won't do the Tech 3 thing personally, but I'm sure I'll participate. And from discussions we've had about it so far, I think I can say that people shouldn't be as nervous as a lot of them probably are. I know that some of the sort of casual posts by any of us in sort of the balance department could be kind of alarming for Tech 3 users. But I know that from talking to Fozzie about it, who likely will be kind of lead on that pass, it's not like they're going to get this crazy nerf or some kind of crazy repurposing that makes them useless for the things people use them for now. We have a really big respect for the fact that they have a really big place in the game, and that people, a lot of people base their gameplay off of them, and we wouldn't want to just rip all that out for no reason. But that said, there's a lot of balance issues there. There's definitely some configurations that are too strong. There's also a lot of configurations that are probably too weak, and so I think probably what'll happen is just a long balance path through all the subsystems that tries to just provide more balance overall. Again, like I wouldn't know how to be more specific than that, but I don't think people should feel like this Armageddon is just around the corner where all of their Tech 3 ships become some garbage like station decoration. So
awesome. Yeah. I know there were people being like, oh, looking at these I don't know, there was just all kinds of crazy things.
I thought it was really interesting. People somehow interpreted the hack rebalance as a big sign of a Tech 3 nerf, and I still don't understand really why, but
it has something to do with like things are supposed to be specific and or generalized, and you're gonna like I don't know. It was something to do with that, but there was a lot of crazy like, ask them about the Tech 3 nerf and when we'll all have to quit the game type things posted on our forums. So
just quit the game
I'm glad
now.
to hear that. Yeah, I mean it's fair. It's a good call. You heard it here first.
But
quit the game now.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't sweat it too much. It's possible that if you have, some super OP thing you're really excited about, that it will get toned down a little bit, but I wouldn't expect like sweeping brutal nerfs to Tech 3s. They're definitely very cool, and people we're like we want people to be using them afterwards, probably for a lot of the same things they're using them for now. So
yeah, I guess like in my head, like I kind of hope like that the different combinations of subsystems become more usable, I guess, because there's a lot of like potential with that. But I feel it's just really untapped because of how things play out now.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Like that's hopefully what we would want to, is that there was just more, if anything, the sort of generalized theme that they're supposed to represent hopefully would mean that there's just more applications, that they're capable of doing more stuff than they can right now. We'll see. I mean, it's a difficult goal. They're obviously really complicated to balance too, but
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But Fozzie is a wizard, so we'll see. We'll hopefully end up with a lot more options and not a bunch of really mad current Tech 3 users.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's exciting. I'm sure I could ask you questions all day, but I think we've covered a lot of it. I really appreciate you, coming on here, and I'm sure in the future we'd love to have you on here again, maybe after a few more casts, or a lot more if you're willing to come back. I don't know. And yeah, I don't know. Anything else in closing, Phil, that you want to say?
No, yeah, definitely thank you for being here, guys, because this is really awesome. Like, I would never have expected to see the day where I'm like, oh, I'm interviewing a CCP dev, and especially like Kill 2/Rise.
Yeah, it's fun. I don't know. I'd like to think that I have like really precious time, and that I'm always, doing some amazing dev exclusive activity, but actually it's just pretty fun to talk about spaceships, and I really, really appreciate people making content for the game. I obviously liked it a lot. I think I got into the game because of the work other people put into making stuff like podcasts and videos, and so it's pretty great to have the opportunity to support it now. So don't sweat it. Maybe I will come back before too long. We'll see.
Well, awesome. All right. So yeah. So CCP Rise is our guest. He's been fantastic. TheDailyRoam.com is our website. The Daily Roam in-game channel stop by, talk about anything you want, whatever. It's all good. Yeah. Thanks again for coming on, and the next episode should probably be out within about a week, give or take, depending on everything. So, all right, yeah. Appreciate everyone listening. Appreciate you coming on, CC Rise, and that's it.
Cool. See you, everyone.
Peace.